Hi, everybody. My name is Steve Haley. I'm Director of Economic Development at ModusBox. We're one of the Mojaloop Foundation members, and we're actually the technology company that's responsible for a lot of the build and some of the commercial implementations of Mojaloop. First, before I get started, I'd like to thank Innocent and the entire HiPipo team, not only for having me here, but for, and not only for this event, but for the role that you play in the inclusive fintech ecosystem in Uganda. It's an incredibly important role, and I really hope it continues. I've never seen impactful change happen without leaders like you in a market. So the first thing we're going to talk about is real-time payments. I think most of you understand what real-time payments are. You've experienced it with mobile money, where you're sending money from one MTN account to another MTN account, and that money goes through instantaneously, and then you can cash out as soon as you get it. What we're talking about real-time payment networks is the ability to send money from any account at any financial institution to any account at any financial institution. And that allows us for, that interoperability allows for massive network effects, which really drive transaction growth. And as an example, I live in India, and here we've got this interoperable system that's real time called UPI. And in just the past 2 years of operations, we've grown to over 2 billion transactions per month, which as a reference is more than the entirety of telco mobile money on the continent of Africa. And we're expected to hit 10 million within the next couple of years. And as we all know, mobile money has been massively growing. There's over 100 implementations or 100 countries with implementations of mobile money, but we still have over 1.7 billion unbanked people. And even those that are banked, a lot of times that's disconnected to financial services. And so how can we solve that problem? That's really what Mojaloop is going after. And so I talked about the comparison with mobile money in the last slide, the main difference being mobile money are great, but they're silos. And we're talking about a network that includes all accounts. And some DFSPs or digital financial service providers, both banks, microfinance, and mobile money, are really starting to understand that growth in transactions and growth in customers really comes from interoperability. And they're really on the forefront of driving that kind of change. Now, obviously, there are some laggards, but it's exciting that there are some that are really seeing the requirements. I do want to say there's a difference between some types of interoperability. We do have cards, we have ACH, but if we're talking about the ability to pay something even less than $1, then it really requires an instantaneous movement of that money, not in 6 hours like an ACH, and not actually receiving that money a couple of days later like in a card transaction. So maybe it's easier if we talk about something concrete. Let's imagine Winnie. She's a shopkeeper. She has a variety of needs for financial services. She needs savings, she needs credit, she needs risk mitigation, she needs receive payments, she needs to make payments to her suppliers. And she can't afford to wait a couple of days until a payment clears into her bank account. And even though her bank might offer her some type of income smoothing products, that's going to come at a cost. And that's a cost she can't afford. And she shouldn't have to pay for a problem that the banking industry has caused for her. There's a better way. And I mean, let's be honest, chances are, even if she has a bank account, her bank doesn't interoperate with the mobile money wallets of her customers. And and it might not even interoperate very well with her supplier's bank. And if they do, they charge her a really high fee. But honestly, the most likely situation is that Winnie, and I think we've all met someone like this or know someone like this, has 2 wallets, 2 bank accounts to pay different suppliers. She probably has at least 1 loan from a microfinance institution. She's getting credit from her suppliers. So she's getting financial services from a variety of different areas. But the biggest problem is she's got to pay a massive amount of money every time she wants to move from one of those financial service providers to another, because she pays for the cash out and she pays for the cash in, both in her time and her fees. And that's just not sustainable. And so excluding people like Winnie and the millions of other micro and small enterprises like her, it hurts their business. But it doesn't just hurt their business, it hurts the growth of the economy. And therefore it stifles the growth of the financial service providers. And I think more and more financial service providers are starting to understand, if they want to see genuine growth and expand the market, they need to get behind interoperability. And again, a lot of people would say, well, mobile money solved this problem. Yeah, mobile money solved a huge problem. It was a big deal, but it didn't solve the entire problem because those accounts were still isolated, as are microfinance accounts. But some of that isolation was broken down through bilateral agreements. But these connections are largely unregulated, they're largely unsupervised, and most importantly, they're often insecure because moving money between the push payments world of mobile money and the pull payments world of banks is very, very dangerous. Obviously, actually, you're all in Uganda. I don't have to tell you any of this. It's been in the news all over the world for the past couple of months. But the solution really is a single real-time payment network built for that purpose. And that's what Mojaloop is. So an economic and inclusive payment ecosystem needs to have a few special characteristics to it. First, it needs to be interoperable across all payment providers, not just a selected few mobile wallets and banks. Second, it needs to be instant, real time, just like I was talking about, instantaneously, you got the money in your wallet. It needs to be affordable, it needs to be safe. Otherwise, people are just going to stick to cash. It also needs to be push payments, no pull payments, and that's to keep the cost down. It needs to address all the oversight needs of the regulator. And lastly, and most importantly, we're talking about different classes of DFSPs with different types of KYC. It's incredibly important that the hub that's at the center has the ability to translate into different levels of KYC depending on which institutions you're talking about transacting with. And that's, again, what Mojaloop does. Now, there are four main components of Mojaloop. The first one is the interoperability layer. And that's basically the piece that manages the clearing from one account in one institution to another account in another institution. And you might think, well, it sounds like a simple API. But when you're talking about open payments, the security involved is actually no small feat. And so that is actually quite complicated. The next is the directory service or the account lookup service. And that's what allows a client to, or a customer to send money to another customer or pay a merchant without knowing anything about their bank. When I go and I use a credit card or I go and I pay at a merchant, I don't need to know what their bank is. All I need to know is that they accept my payment. And same with if I'm ordering something online, I don't need to know who their bank is. And that's what we should get to as well. I should just be able to pay you based off some alias. The next one is the transaction settlement. And the settlement has to happen very, very quickly. You can't have settlement that takes a day or 2 days to settle. We need to be settling at least once a day, but likely a couple times per day, even every 15 to 30 minutes. And that's going to keep the liquidity requirements for all the participants as low as possible. And that cost of capital is one of the things that's keeping their fees high. The last piece there is that is the logging and monitoring system that enables a wide range of fraud systems. There's a chance you can have a lot of different use cases running on these rails with a lot of different types of institutions. It's going to be important that the central fraud system has the ability to cover all of those things. So what's the big deal with Mojaloop? Not only does it suit this need, but it's also open source. And what that allows for is local control. So first of all, it's locally owned. That means since the code is open source, the local installation is all locally owned by the central bank or the scheme owner or the operator, but not by a foreign vendor. It's locally operated. That means there's no reliance on the foreign company to actually operate the system for you. And there's actually even no reliance on a single local operator because you can always move to another operator and not have to change out the technology. And that's one of the massive benefits of using an open source solution for this. It's also locally governed. Just because the rules work well in one country doesn't mean they're going to work well in another country. The local participants and the regulator need to be able to set the rules without interference from the vendor. Lastly, it's locally stored. And data sovereignty is incredibly important to everyone. It's incredibly important to regulators. That means they need to be able to say which information they want in the cloud or on-prem. And Mojaloop offers both and offers you to actually have a hybrid solution. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the benefits of the fact that it's open source. First is security. Now, as we've all seen, when you have a local local fintech company that's managing payments and managing interconnections, No one is looking at their security flaws except them, and nobody's working on fixing their security flaws except for them. With the open source code, you've got many more eyes looking for flaws and fixing those flaws, making it much more secure. We could talk about the benefits and optimization of integration, of customization, but one of the things that I think is really critical to think about is the ability for fintechs to dig into the code, build products and services on top of the code, which enables them to grow not in their markets. Now, where this becomes a benefit for the other adopters, and we hope that Uganda is an early adopter of Mojaloop, is that the fintech ecosystem in Uganda can then build products and services on top of Mojaloop, which then, when other countries in the region and around Africa start adopting Mojaloop, those Ugandan fintech companies can export what they've been doing and expand regionally. And that would be pretty exciting. So that's why we really are hoping that Uganda becomes an early adopter of Mojaloop to help you expand your fintech ecosystem well beyond your borders. So it's important when we talk about this ecosystem that it benefits everyone. It has to benefit the banks with more clients and more deposits, the government with better supervision, the merchants with the better ability to accept digital payments from anyone, and users in particular with the ability to pay anywhere and anything at any time. Now, since most of you are fintech devs and startups, I mean, there's three ways you can use Mojaloop. You can adapt it to fit what you need. You can update with the existing product services and new products and services, and you can improve the ongoing code as a member of the community. We hope you do all three. That's really why we want you here. So just for reference, Mojaloop is actually currently being implemented in a couple of places, with the Tanzania Instant Payment System being led by the central bank, the Bank of Tanzania. And on the other side, we've got Mawali, which is a private sector-led Mojaloop deployment led by MTN and Orange in West Africa. As you can see, the Mojaloop Foundation, those of you who were involved in the very beginning knew, it was the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Now it's Koyo, Google, ModusBox, Rockefeller Foundation, Ripple, Omidyar, PhonePe, a number of others, and constantly growing. And again, we hope that more and more of you join the community as well. But we're obviously incredibly excited to have such big names on the Mojaloop Foundation now. Really shows the possibilities for actual expansion across the globe. So because all of this can get very vague, I really want to be able to understand how do we translate that into an actual real-time payment project. And this is how ModusBox recommends you implement a real-time payment project. The first thing is to think about that the payment system is never done. It is a living system. You should constantly be improving it, constantly adding more use cases, constantly adding more features, constantly evolving to fit the needs of the market. And you can only do that if you get into an agile mindset right from the beginning. And that's what we're here to talk about. You always have to be doing this process, going around in this circle, doing your market research, re-looking at your principles and your rules and your regulation, adding new products, refining your products based on what the market needs, refining the technical system or the Mojaloop that actually holds all of that, and then onboarding participants and hardening the onboarding aspects of those participants, and then doing it again, and then doing it again. We would recommend that you start with 3 phases to get you up and running. The first one being the proof of value or proof of concept. You can actually do that in as little as 3 or 4 months if everybody's on board. And it's a great learning exercise for the participants as well as for the regulator about what they actually will want in terms of products and use cases and what it will look like, and for everyone to understand how do we actually come together as an industry and decide on some of these things that help set up those systems. The next one, which is the live sandbox or the second phase, again, that can probably take anywhere from 6 months to a year. And that's going to get you to live transactions, but with a relatively limited number of transactions. So some of your settlement, some of your operations, some of your dispute might not be automated because you can handle it with the number of transactions that are going through the system. You also may not want to go through the entire process of revamping your whole regulatory framework until you've had this live sandbox, because that'll help the regulator understand exactly what they need to change. And then the last phase is the handover. And that's where ModusBox, if we were helping you, we would hand over all of this to a local operator so that they could take over the daily operations and maintenance of the system, as well as all of the upgrades. And that's when really you're off and running. And you can start adding more use cases. And you can start refining your business rules to make sure that that's going to lead to incredible growth of your system. What I want to highlight here is not necessarily those details, but I mean, we're happy to take you through those details if anybody wants to fund a phased project for Uganda. But the most important thing to think about here is that product, technology, regulation, and governance all have to happen constantly and together. You can't have a product or a project that just does first regulation, then governance, then product, then technology. It's just not going to work. Now, again, most of you work in the fintech startup ecosystem, so you understand the value of agile. Sometimes industries are not ready for agile. And what I'm here to tell you is it is possible to run a national payments system project using agile methodology with all 4 of these components going in parallel. It is possible. It is better. And I mean, ModusBox and the Mojaloop Foundation, we're here to help you do it. And so with that, again, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk to you. And I really hope to communicate with a bunch of you on Mojaloop in the future. Please reach out if you need anything. Thank you.